The horrific truth about breeding farms during slavery. Imagine a nation built on freedom, yet stained by the chains of millions. Journey into the dark heart of America's past, where the whispers of enslaved Africans echo through the cotton fields. Join us as we navigate the grim annals of breeding farms and the relentless grind of cotton plantations, bearing witness to the stories of those who suffered and those who resisted. This is a history we can't afford to forget. The mechanism that magnified misery. Eli Whitney's cotton gin. As the 18th century drew to a close, a young Yale graduate named Eli Whitney arrived in Georgia seeking opportunity. Little did he know that his invention, born amidst the sprawling cotton fields, would reshape the American economy and cast a long, dark shadow over the institution of slavery. Before Whitney's arrival, processing cotton was incredibly labor-intensive. Separating the sticky seeds from the cotton fibers was a slow and tedious task, mainly performed by enslaved individuals. This made growing short-staple cotton, the type that thrived in the South, unprofitable. Instead, planters focused on long-staple cotton, which grew only in limited coastal areas and was easier to process. But in 1793, Whitney unveiled his groundbreaking invention, the cotton gin. This simple yet ingenious machine could process cotton at an astonishing rate, 50 times faster than a human worker. Suddenly, short-staple cotton became incredibly profitable, and the landscape of the South was forever changed. Plantations, fueled by the promise of wealth, expanded rapidly inland. Short-staple cotton became the heart of the Southern economy, but at a terrible human cost. Paradoxically, the machine designed to reduce labor actually increased the demand for enslaved people. More hands were needed to plant, harvest, and process the ever-increasing cotton crops. The importation of enslaved Africans surged, and the institution of slavery became even more deeply entrenched in the South. Frederick Douglass, a former slave who became a powerful voice for abolition, recognized the tragic irony of Whitney's invention. He observed that the white man's power to enslave the black man grew out of the very progress of the nation. The cotton gin, intended as a symbol of progress, became a tool of oppression, magnifying the misery of millions. Sowing Shadows, the dark harvest of slave breeding in America. Hidden within the grim narrative of American slavery lies a particularly chilling chapter, the practice of slave breeding. This wasn't just about profit margins, it was a deliberate and systematic intrusion into the most personal aspects of enslaved people's lives, a cruel manipulation of their bodies and families for the economic benefit of slaveholders. As the importation of enslaved Africans slowed in the late 1700s and was eventually outlawed in 1808, the demand for labor in the burgeoning cotton fields of the South didn't diminish. Instead, it took a sinister turn inward. Slaveholders, seeking to maintain their workforce and increase their wealth, began to focus on breeding enslaved people, forcing them to reproduce to create a new generation of enslaved laborers. Virginia, with its large enslaved population, became known as the breeding state. Places like Lumpkin's Jail in Richmond, a notorious slave trading center often called the Devil's Half Acre, became hubs for this horrific practice. Robert Lumpkin, who ran the jail, not only profited from the sale of enslaved people, but was also implicated in the forced breeding of enslaved women. The personal accounts of enslaved people offer a glimpse into the devastating impact of this practice. Harriet Jacobs, in her autobiography, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Woman, detailed the relentless sexual harassment and abuse she endured at the hands of her enslaver, Dr. James Norcom. Norcom's actions were driven not just by lust, but by a calculated desire to produce more enslaved children, turning Harriet into a forced breeder against her will. The writings of Mary Chestnut, a Southern planter's wife, provide another perspective. She noted the disturbing prevalence of mixed-race children on plantations, fathered by white slaveholders but born into slavery. Chestnut wrote, "Like the patriarchs of old, our men live all in one house with their wives and their concubines, and the mulattoes one sees in every family exactly resemble the white children." Her words expose the open secret of slave breeding and the hypocrisy of a system that claimed to uphold family values while simultaneously tearing apart enslaved families. When white gold ruled the land, the dominance of King Cotton. In the 19th century, a simple crop, cotton, rose to dominate the American South, transforming the region into a global economic powerhouse and solidifying its dependence on the brutal institution of slavery. This is the story of how King Cotton ruled the land, weaving a complex tapestry of prosperity and suffering. The rise of King Cotton began not in the South, but in the bustling textile mills of England, fueled by the insatiable demands of the Industrial Revolution. Southern planters, recognizing an opportunity, eagerly embraced cotton cultivation. The ports of Charleston, Mobile, and New Orleans became hubs of activity as vast quantities of cotton were shipped across the Atlantic. Historian John Motley captured the global reach of this southern crop, stating, "Cotton is king, and he waves his scepter not only over these 33 states, but over the island of Great Britain and over continental Europe." By the 1830s, cotton accounted for nearly 2/3 of all U.S. exports, making it the nation's most valuable commodity. However, the prosperity generated by King Cotton was inextricably linked to the horrors of slavery. Senator James Henry Hammond of South Carolina, a staunch defender of slavery, boasted in Congress, "Without firing a gun, should they make war on us, we could bring the whole world to our feet. What would happen if no cotton was furnished for 3 years?" Hammond's words, though arrogant, highlighted the South's belief that its control over cotton production gave it immense economic and political power. This power was derived from the forced labor of millions of enslaved people. As cotton plantations expanded, the demand for enslaved labor skyrocketed. By 1860, approximately 4 million enslaved individuals toiled in the cotton fields of the South, their lives and labor dedicated to enriching a small elite of plantation owners. The tentacles of King Cotton's influence reached far beyond the South. Bankers in New York, ship owners in New England, and textile mill operators in England all profited from the cotton trade, creating a complex web of economic interdependence that made challenging slavery a daunting task. Cotton fever gripped the South, with towns named Cottonwood, Cottondale, and Cotton Plant springing up across the landscape. A story from the time tells of a Southern planter who, when challenged about the South's reliance on cotton, pulled a cotton seed from his pocket and declared, "Sir, in this seed lies more power than in all the crowns of Europe." This anecdote captures the confidence and ambition that characterized the era of King Cotton. What surprised you most about the realities of life and work on cotton plantations? In the shadow of white gold, lives lived beneath the cotton sun. The vast cotton fields of the antebellum South were a landscape of stark contrasts, where the bright promise of white gold cast a long, dark shadow over the lives of enslaved individuals. Their days were filled with backbreaking labor, but also with moments of resilience, community, and the enduring hope for freedom. Imagine waking before sunrise, the southern sun already radiating its intense heat. On plantations like Monticello and those in Mississippi's Natchez district, enslaved people were roused from their sleep by the overseer's call. This signaled the start of another grueling day in the cotton fields, their nimble fingers picking and stuffing cotton blooms into seemingly bottomless sacks. But cotton wasn't the only demand on their time and skills. Enslaved craftsmen, like those at James Madison's Montpelier estate, were skilled blacksmiths, carpenters, and masons, building and maintaining the plantation infrastructure. Enslaved women, in addition to field work, cooked, cleaned, sewed, and often cared for the children of their enslavers, their lives a constant cycle of labor and servitude. Harriet Jacobs, a former enslaved woman, wrote poignantly about the toll this relentless work took on her spirit. The beautiful spring came, and when nature resumes her loveliness, the human soul is apt to revive also. But for Jacobs and countless others, these moments of hope were fleeting, overshadowed by the harsh realities of their enslavement. Despite the constant oppression, enslaved people found ways to carve out spaces of humanity and resistance. They shared stories from their African homelands, whispered tales of hope, and found moments for laughter and connection. Spirituals, rich with coded messages of escape and freedom, filled the air. Songs like "Steal Away to Jesus" and "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot" offered solace and a sense of shared purpose. Evenings brought a brief respite from the fields. Enslaved families gathered in their cramped cabins, sharing meager meals and finding comfort in each other's company. On some plantations, Saturday nights were marked by dances and celebrations, where the rhythms of Africa echoed through the night. Sundays, though intended as a day of rest, often meant tending to personal gardens, a vital source of food to supplement their inadequate rations. Echoes of home, unbroken spirits in shackled times. In the heart of the 18th century South, amidst the sprawling cotton plantations and the harsh realities of slavery, a vibrant and resilient culture blossomed. Enslaved Africans, despite being stripped of their freedom and their homeland, carried within them the echoes of their past, weaving a rich tapestry of traditions, stories, and music that defied the dehumanizing forces of slavery. As the sun set over the South Carolina plantations, the rhythmic beats of drums resonated through the air, carrying not just melodies, but coded messages of resistance. These hidden communication networks, developed under the watchful eyes of overseers, allowed enslaved people to share news, offer support, and keep alive the hope of freedom. Storytellers, known as griots in their African homelands, played a vital role in preserving the cultural memories of their people. Venture Smith, an enslaved man who documented his life's journey from Africa to America in 1798, became a powerful voice, sharing stories of his past and inspiring others to hold on to their heritage. The blending of different African cultures on plantations led to the creation of new and unique traditions. The Gullah Geechee community, living on the sea islands of Georgia and South Carolina, developed a distinct Creole language, a fusion of English and African dialects. Their culture, a vibrant mix of African customs and New World experiences, flourished despite the oppressive conditions they faced. Their songs, dances, and even dishes like okra stew spoke of their adaptability and determination to preserve their identity. Family remained a cornerstone of enslaved life. In the face of forced separations and the constant threat of being sold away from loved ones, enslaved individuals created their own kinship networks, offering support and a sense of belonging. Terms like auntie and uncle transcended blood ties, signifying respect and affection within the enslaved community. In the shadow of the iron collar, power's grasp on the plantation. The idyllic facade of southern plantations, with their sprawling fields and grand mansions, masked a sinister reality, a meticulously crafted system of control designed to crush the spirit and autonomy of enslaved people. This web of domination extended far beyond physical violence, employing psychological manipulation, religious indoctrination, and the constant threat of family separation to maintain its iron grip. At daybreak, on plantations like Monticello and the Whitney Plantation, enslaved individuals could be seen bearing the physical burden of their oppression, iron collars around their necks. These cruel devices, used to punish those deemed rebellious or to prevent escape, served as a constant reminder of their dehumanized status. Each step taken under the weight of these collars was an act of defiance, a testament to the enduring human spirit that refused to be broken. Slave patrols, roaming the countryside on horseback, were a visible manifestation of this oppressive power. Their task was to deter rebellion and capture runaway slaves, their very presence casting a shadow of fear over enslaved communities. Physical punishments were a cornerstone of this system of control. The whipping post, a grim fixture on many plantations, bore witness to countless acts of brutality. Each lash inflicted on an enslaved person's back was intended to break their will and reinforce their subservience. Yet, as the story of Gordon, whose scarred back became a powerful symbol of the abolitionist movement, demonstrates, these physical wounds could also become emblems of resilience and defiance. But the tools of oppression extended beyond physical violence. The threat of family separation was a powerful psychological weapon. Mothers were torn from their children, husbands from their wives, the constant fear of losing loved ones hanging over the enslaved population like a dark cloud. Please comment 1 to let me know you'll be watching this video until the end. Sacred Dualities, the divine dance of oppressor and oppressed. In the antebellum South, religion played a complex and often contradictory role in the lives of both slaveholders and enslaved people. For the powerful, it served as a justification for the institution of slavery, while for the oppressed, it became a source of solace, resistance, and a pathway to freedom. In the grand churches of Charleston and Savannah, slaveholders found validation for their actions in carefully selected biblical passages. Verses like Ephesians 6:5, which urged slaves to obey their masters, were used to reinforce the notion that slavery was divinely ordained and that enslaved people were obligated to submit to their enslavers. The Bible, in their hands, became a tool to maintain the status quo and to silence any dissent. However, abolitionists like John Brown and William Lloyd Garrison challenged this interpretation, using the same scriptures to advocate for the dismantling of slavery. Garrison, known for his fiery rhetoric, often quoted Galatians 3:28. "There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." He argued that the true message of Christianity was one of equality and that slavery was a perversion of God's will. While the elite debated theology, enslaved people created their own unique religious experiences in the hidden spaces of the plantations. They blended African traditions with Christian beliefs, forging a vibrant and soulful spirituality that provided comfort and strength in the face of unimaginable hardship. The woods surrounding the plantations became secret sanctuaries where they could gather in the moonlight to pray, sing, and find solace in their shared faith. Denmark Vesey, an enslaved man in Charleston, used his knowledge of the Bible to inspire and organize a planned rebellion in 1822. He drew parallels between the plight of enslaved people in America and the Israelites in Egypt, positioning himself as a modern-day Moses, leading his people to freedom. The spirituals sung in the fields were more than just work songs. They were coded messages of hope, resistance, and longing for liberation. "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," with its haunting melody and lyrics alluding to the biblical story of Elijah's ascent to heaven, became an anthem of hope for enslaved people dreaming of escaping to freedom. Water, particularly the act of baptism, held deep symbolic meaning for enslaved people. Performed in secret ceremonies by riversides, baptism represented not only spiritual rebirth, but also a cleansing from the trauma and degradation of slavery. The spiritual "wade in the water," with its instructions for escaping slaves to wade through rivers to throw off tracking dogs, illustrates the intertwining of religious and practical advice in these coded songs. Shadowed Journeys, the silent torrent of America's inner slave trails. When the transatlantic slave trade was officially banned in 1808, The horrors of human trafficking didn't disappear, they simply shifted course. A vast and brutal domestic slave trade emerged, transporting enslaved people from the Upper South to the burgeoning cotton plantations of the Deep South. This internal trade, often overlooked in historical narratives, became a silent torrent of suffering, tearing families apart and leaving an indelible scar on the American landscape. Cities like Richmond and New Orleans became hubs for this internal trade. Slave pens, grim holding cells for those awaiting sale, dotted the urban landscape. Auction blocks, often located in prominent public spaces, became stages for the dehumanizing spectacle of human beings being bought and sold like livestock. The air was thick with the stench of fear, despair, and the muffled cries of families being torn apart. Notorious slave traders like Isaac Franklin and John Armfield built their fortunes on this trade. Operating from Alexandria, Virginia, they orchestrated the forced migration of thousands of enslaved people to the Deep South. Their business was meticulously organized, with enslaved individuals often subjected to forced feedings and even iron masks to prevent them from communicating or attempting escape during their journey. This domestic slave trade forced countless individuals into agonizing journeys. Coffle chains, which bound enslaved people together in long lines, became a haunting symbol of this era. On foot, by wagon, or aboard steamboats, these caravans of captive souls traversed the American landscape, enduring hardship and brutality along the way. Notorious markets like the Forks of the Road in Natchez, Mississippi, became infamous sites of human suffering, where lives were bought and sold with callous indifference. Solomon Northup, a free black man kidnapped and sold into slavery, provided a first-hand account of this internal trade in his memoir, 12 Years a Slave. His chilling words, "I was soon to learn what I was worth," spoken as he awaited his own sale, capture the dehumanizing experience of being reduced to a commodity. Ironically, the very infrastructure that facilitated this forced migration, the rivers, roads, and railways, also provided avenues for escape. The Underground Railroad, a clandestine network of safe houses and secret routes, operated in parallel to the slave trade, offering a beacon of hope to those seeking freedom. Harriet Tubman, a former slave herself, risked her life countless times to guide others to freedom along these routes, embodying the spirit of resistance and the unwavering pursuit of liberty. Despite the immense suffering they endured, enslaved people found ways to resist and maintain their hope. Songs of defiance, like the spiritual "Follow the Drinking Gourd," which is believed to have contained coded instructions for escaping slaves, became powerful tools of resistance. These musical expressions offered solace, encouragement, and a roadmap to freedom. Even Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, became a major center for the domestic slave trade. Slave pens operated in the shadow of the Capitol building, a stark reminder of the hypocrisy of a nation that proclaimed liberty while simultaneously profiting from the enslavement of millions. The economic impact of this internal slave trade was immense. Banks issued loans based on the value of enslaved people as collateral, and insurance companies offered policies on their lives, further entangling the institution of slavery with the nation's financial system. Silk and iron, the dual threads of enslaved women on cotton plantations. The lives of enslaved women on cotton plantations were a complex tapestry woven from threads of both silk and iron. They were mothers, laborers, caregivers, and artisans, their days filled with backbreaking work, agonizing loss, and moments of quiet defiance. Their stories, though often silenced or overlooked, reveal the remarkable strength and resilience of those who endured the brutal realities of slavery. As dawn broke over the cotton fields, enslaved women joined their male counterparts in the grueling task of picking cotton. Their hands, hardened by labor, moved swiftly among the prickly plants, filling their sacks with the white gold that fueled the Southern economy. But their work didn't end there. After the day's harvest, they returned to the plantation house, where they cooked, cleaned, sewed, and cared for the children of their enslavers. Their lives were a constant cycle of toil, their bodies and spirits exploited to maintain the lavish lifestyles of the slave-holding elite. Harriet Jacobs, in her powerful autobiography, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Woman, provided a harrowing glimpse into the sexual exploitation that many enslaved women faced. She wrote about the constant threat of harassment and abuse from their enslavers, a threat that hung over their lives like a dark cloud. Jacobs herself spent 7 years hiding in a tiny attic space to escape the advances of her master, her story a testament to the lengths to which enslaved women would go to protect themselves and their dignity. Motherhood, a source of profound love and joy for most women, was a bittersweet experience for those enslaved. The birth of a child, while celebrated, was also accompanied by the agonizing fear that the child could be sold away at any moment. Mothers sang lullabies that were both expressions of love and lamentations for the precariousness of their situation. What story or fact from this video about enslaved life and resistance stayed with you the most? The Tapestries of Toil, weaving between cotton, tobacco, and sugar. While cotton stands as a potent symbol of slavery in the American South, it wasn't the only crop woven into the fabric of this brutal system. Tobacco, sugar, and rice each played a distinct role in the colonial and antebellum economies, shaping the lives of enslaved people in unique and often brutal ways. Let's travel back to the early 1600s in Jamestown, Virginia. Enter John Rolfe, an English settler who brought with him a sweeter strain of tobacco from the Caribbean. This golden weed, as it was known, quickly transformed Virginia's economy, turning tobacco into a form of currency and fueling the colony's growth. Even Benjamin Franklin, a man of many talents, recognized tobacco's hold on society, stating, "A pipe of tobacco would cost me a groat, which is the third part of my weekly allowance." But growing tobacco was a demanding endeavor. Unlike cotton, it depleted the soil, requiring frequent shifts in planting grounds. The cultivation process was intricate and labor-intensive, demanding careful attention, from seedbed to harvest. While enslaved labor was essential to tobacco plantations, they were often smaller in scale than the sprawling cotton estates of the Deep South. Further south, in the humid climes of Louisiana, another lucrative crop took root: sugar. The Caribbean was the heart of the sugar trade, but Louisiana emerged as a significant producer in the 18th century. Sugar production was a relentless, around-the-clock operation, demanding speed and efficiency. The saying, "sugar must not wait," underscored the urgency of processing the cane quickly before the juice spoiled. The boiling houses, where enslaved individuals toiled in intense heat to transform cane juice into sugar crystals, were notoriously dangerous and unhealthy, making sugar plantations some of the deadliest for enslaved people. A quote, often misattributed to King Louis XVII's finance minister, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, highlights the European obsession with sugar. "Sugar does not grow on the banks of the Seine." This statement, though inaccurate in its attribution, reveals the insatiable appetite for sugar in Europe and the callous disregard for the human cost of its production in the colonies. Meanwhile, in the low-lying coastal areas of the Carolinas and Georgia, rice cultivation flourished. Rice farming was a grueling and complex process, requiring the creation of elaborate irrigation systems and back-breaking labor. Enslaved Africans from the rice-growing regions of West Africa, like the Gambia, brought with them invaluable expertise in rice cultivation. This knowledge, though forcibly extracted, sometimes afforded them a degree of autonomy in their daily tasks, setting rice plantations apart from those focused on sugar or tobacco. Cotton's shadow, the tangled threads leading to war. In the antebellum South, Cotton was more than just a crop. It was a symbol of wealth, power, and a way of life that was deeply intertwined with the institution of slavery. As the United States became the world's leading cotton producer, the South's dependence on enslaved labor created a chasm between North and South, a chasm that would eventually erupt into the Civil War. By the 1850s, cotton accounted for a staggering 60% of U.S. exports, making it the lifeblood of the Southern economy. Enslaved people, their lives and labor dedicated to the cultivation of this white gold, formed the foundation of this prosperity. The South, with its vast cotton plantations and a powerful elite deeply invested in maintaining slavery, viewed its dominance in the cotton trade as a source of economic and political strength. However, the North, undergoing rapid industrialization and increasingly influenced by abolitionist sentiment, viewed slavery with growing moral outrage and economic concern. Harriet Beecher Stowe's powerful novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, published in 1852, exposed the horrors of slavery to a wide audience, galvanizing the abolitionist movement and turning public opinion against the South. Despite the growing tensions, Southern leaders like Senator John C. Calhoun vehemently defended slavery, declaring it a positive good for both black and white people. They believed that cotton was king, their control over global cotton production giving them the power to dictate their own terms. A series of political compromises and confrontations further fueled the divide. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 attempted to maintain a balance of power between slave and free states, but the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, which allowed territories to decide on slavery through popular sovereignty, led to Bleeding Kansas, a violent prelude to the Civil War as pro- and anti-slavery factions clashed. The actions of John Brown, a radical abolitionist who believed he was divinely ordained to end slavery, further inflamed tensions. His raid on Harper's Ferry in 1859, though ultimately unsuccessful, demonstrated the depth of abolitionist fervor and the willingness to use violence to achieve their goals. Brown became a polarizing figure, seen as a martyr by some and a madman by others, but his actions underscored the growing divide between North and South. The election of Abraham Lincoln, a Republican opposed to the expansion of slavery, as president in 1860 proved to be the final straw for the South. Fearing that Lincoln's administration would threaten their way of life, Southern states seceded from the Union, plunging the nation into the Civil War. Even European nations were drawn into the drama of America's internal conflict. Britain, heavily reliant on Southern cotton for its textile industry, watched the unfolding events with concern. However, public sentiment in Britain, which had abolished slavery in its own empire in 1833, leaned towards the Union. Lincoln, recognizing the importance of keeping Britain neutral, sent a shipment of cotton to Britain during the war, signaling that the North could meet their needs and dissuading them from supporting the Confederacy. Echoes of the Fields, Remembering the Cotton Legacy. The civil rights movement of the 1960s sparked a renewed focus on the legacy of slavery. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. drew a direct line between the struggles of the past and the fight for equality in the present. His powerful "I Have a Dream" speech, delivered in 1963, echoed the unfulfilled promises of liberty and justice for all, reminding the nation that the legacy of slavery continued to cast a long shadow over American society. This era also prompted a re-examination of how slavery was taught in schools. Textbooks, which had previously glossed over or minimized the brutality of slavery, were revised to provide a more accurate and comprehensive account. Initiatives like the 1619 Project, launched by the New York Times in 2019, aim to reframe American history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the center of the narrative. Museums, like the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., have become vital spaces for preserving and sharing the stories of enslaved people, offering a powerful testament to their resilience and creativity in the face of unimaginable hardship. Art, too, has become a powerful tool for engaging with the legacy of slavery. Kara Walker's evocative silhouette installations, for example, confront viewers with the brutal realities of plantation life and spark conversations about race, power, and memory. Even on a personal level, individuals and families are grappling with the legacy of slavery. The discovery of old diaries, letters, and other artifacts in attics and basements has led some to uncover their ancestors' roles in this dark chapter of American history, prompting reflection, reconciliation, and sometimes painful truths. However, the journey of remembrance is not without its challenges. The ongoing debate over Confederate statues and symbols illustrates the deep divisions that still exist over how to interpret and commemorate the past. Some view these monuments as tributes to Southern heritage, while others see them as painful reminders of oppression and white supremacy. The echoes of the cotton fields continue to reverberate through American society, prompting us to confront difficult truths, engage in challenging conversations, and work towards a more just and equitable future. By acknowledging the legacy of slavery, honoring the memories of those who suffered under its yoke, and committing to dismantling its lingering effects, we can begin to heal the wounds of the past and build a society that truly lives up to its ideals of liberty and justice for all. Did we miss any important aspects of this complex history? Let us know in the comments. If you found this journey through the past enlightening, be sure to watch other videos in this series. Don't forget to subscribe and share Who Remembers with someone you know. As always, thank you for watching, and let's keep the conversation going.